Okay, I can project my voice quite a long way, but we're going to be mostly on a film for about 45 minutes I've made specially for this event. It's a patch of different things. I think you'll find it quite exciting in places. I live in the Channon. I used to live there at Zaytuna Farm. I now live there. The house isn't on this photo yet. I'm just going to take you through this whole sort of film experience. We make a lot of films, and I work all over the world. I'm a bit jet lagged, so I must apologise. I've only just got back in the country about 70 hours ago, something like that. I've just come from Morocco. No, there you go, I'm jet lagged. I've just come from Jordan. I was in Morocco earlier this year. I left Australia 2 months ago. I had a month in South Africa. I taught 4 courses. I arrived in Jordan and I taught 3 courses. And we've just built a straw bale mud brick house in Jordan, another one, because we have quite a few around a project called Green in the Desert. We work on lots of consultancies in all climates, but I do quite a lot in dry lands, but I prefer the subtropics and tropics, really. I won't rattle on too long. Anyway, that's who I am. I make a lot of films, got a lot of websites, got a lot of followers on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. It's not just me. There's about 26 people stood behind me that you can't see that work all the time, all over the world. So we've got a lot of things going on. We have a very big online education system with thousands of people taking courses. And I work for governments and corporations and royal families. I've just been working for a lady called Princess Basma in the Badia Desert of Jordan. So here's the Channon. And because I have, you're going to hear a lot about one particular member of my team. They usually come out of my student base. So he came out of my student base. But we do a lot of mapping. I've been a map freak since I was this big. I was born in an era where you had to be seen and not heard as a child. So with old parents in the 1950s. So I've brought my mapping up and up and up and up. And in recent years, we've got LiDAR. Now, you might hear a little bit about LiDAR in this. LiDAR is something rather unusual. It's billions of data points coming in at different angles from satellites that can see through the trees. That's why they keep finding these ancient cities and castles and temples underneath rainforests. So, and because we're mapping mad, we do a lot of, that's a satellite image of the Channon, right? And I'll just explain this first bit of the film because it's not explained, it's just for you to view. I found out that the earliest photographs, aerial photographs, started in 1943 in Australia, which is about the time most places in the world got glass lenses good enough to make aerial photographs work. So because of the war effort, the whole of Australia was photographed in 1943. So they're actually available in the National Archives in Canberra, and not easy to get hold of. The bureaucrats that work there are really slow and not very helpful. And if you go on the website to look for it, it's really difficult to see which flight path it was, because it was an aeroplane flying with a glass lens. I eventually got it. It's about $155. The trouble is, the difference between an aerial photograph in 1943 and now, which is pretty accurate, our LiDAR maps are accurate within 50 millimeters vertical and horizontal. It's actually a missile coordinate from the military, really, right? It's a mining military technology that's been released to the public. And we even have dampness maps now where we can see shallow aquifers and damp areas. We can put an algorithm over a contour map and see the way the water flows and the water floods when it's saturated, and all kinds of unusual layers of maps. I love it particularly, but I like to translate it for my students and my clients of consultancy. And I've got a slope map, which is degrees of slope, just like an altitude map is in different colors as you go higher. This is a slope map. So if you know the lowest plateau and how that was regenerated in the most recent years, they worked on slope, so they treated different areas of slope, different degrees of slope, in different ways. Anything over 18 degrees is normally left in forest, and then when you come down to 18 to 12, with erosion control, you can grow productive trees quite easily, but you need erosion control, like our previous speaker was talking about, contour systems. And then when you come down to 8 to 4, and then 4 to 2, and then 2 to 0 is nearly flat. So it translates the landscape. I've made films about this for the Channon and for the Channon community, because it's actually just as cheap to do hundreds of acres as it to do 20 acres. You know, it doesn't make much difference to the satellite. But I found these maps, and then I wanted to do a time lapse of the Channon now to the Channon in 1943, which is a black and white photo, of course. I'm just telling this story because it's an interesting story, right? Because it's way out of my realm of operation. It's not my team members had to do this. When you look at that map and this map, there's a lot of difference, of course, 1943. It's great to look at which property you've got now. But it was morphed, if you like. It was warped. It wasn't real. This is much closer to real. So what we did was, well, what I didn't do, but what my team members did, they found 10 points that were exactly the same in 1943, that were exactly the same now, because the roads have changed, a lot of the houses have changed, the creeks definitely changed. And when they found the 10 points, they knew those 10 points were the same. Then they put some kind of system in the computer that stretched the 1943 map to meet the 2022 map, if you like. And it took 10 days of the computer grunting and groaning to stretch this old photograph to be exactly the same proportions as that photograph. So if you're interested in that, or you want me to share a photograph with you of a 1943 map instead of going to pay $155, if you're in there, you're in this one, right? So that's just the start. The rest I'll just talk to you afterwards. It gets a bit rowdy, so you're in for a bit of a journey. Even there's a little bit of the Matrix in here. Start her up, mate.
If someone gave you like a really large amount of money, you know, and a lot of power to make some, you know, large scale changes, what would you see as the leverage points? Like, what would you do if, you know, you had whatever $50 billion and, you know, 100 square miles or whatever it is of degraded landscape? Like, what do you feel like is the you know, least effort for the greatest change that you would see doing over large scale landscapes to restore the hydrologic cycle, the ecosystems, soil organic matter, all those things?
There's no limits, right? And I've got total choice. The first thing I would do is I'd work with my team. Right? I have a very large team. I'm very lucky. I've taught a lot of students, and a lot of them become very active, and they come to me with their skills. So I'm extremely fortunate that I'm very much a team player. So all you see is me at the front here, but there's 26 plus people behind me doing all kinds of things. And one of my best starting points, and always today, is my mapping expert, Ben Missimer. Yeah.
I just talked to Ben yesterday.
Pearl River Eco Design. He has been one of my best assets. Yeah. I mean, Bill Mollison always said maps are one of my most important tools. Now I've got LiDAR. Now I've got Ben enhancing LiDAR. I started mapping with Ben when he mapped a tuna farm from America without telling me and then sent me the design, it blew me away. I've been a map freak all my life. I love maps.
Ben does the animations on my videos now. So he also he can make the maps move as well. He's really exceptional. Yeah.
Yeah. And he has invested his life skills and all his financial skills. We need to, I don't know what would happen if I lost Ben.
And I don't know what I would do without the help and support of my childhood best friend and mapping buddy, Charlie Roselle, or the care and support from our families.
The word agriculture comes from agrarian, meaning the soil, and culture, the enrichment of soil. Yet today, modern industrialized agriculture is a system that destroys soils, extracts soils, minerals, and degrades soils and erodes soils. We have lost touch with the natural systems of the culture of soil. Topsoil is the layer that allows plants to grow and is decreasing at an alarming rate because of soil erosion. Most of the main crops of the world are eroding soils at 200 tons per acre per year. This cannot go on because topsoil is the basis of life on Earth. If we look at the present world, as a species, we've lost touch with the natural systems, and industrialized agriculture goes against the laws of nature, and we are not separate from nature. To find a solution, we have to look at nature, and we have to build systems where humanity lives that is 70% forest cover, because it's in the forests that we truly learn. And it's the forests that help us to manage our soil's stability and enable that soil to maintain its fertility. The word permaculture comes from permanence and agriculture, but it naturally leads to permanence in culture. It's a system that focuses on solutions rather than problems. It's the art of working with natural systems to create productive ecosystems that provide all the basic needs of humanity. A design science that begins with ethics and mimics natural systems in any landscape, in any climate, anywhere on Earth. Permaculture is the way we go beyond sustainability and into resilience.
I've worked non-stop over the past 3 years developing my workflow and sizable portfolio. I've had to acquire many new skills as well as draw from my past experiences. So straight out of high school, I joined the Navy and I worked as an aviation electronics technician for 8 years. I worked on helicopters and all sorts of electronics equipment. When I got out in 2006, I took an 8-month carpentry program at my local community college and built 3 homes from the ground up. I really wanted to use my background in electronics and apply it to the construction industry to do smart home technologies. But during 2008, the Great Recession hit and the construction industry tanked, which dramatically changed my trajectory. So I went back to school to get a 2-year degree in electronics engineering technology to bolster my military training and experience. After I left the military, I became addicted to documentaries and explored a lot of unsettling ones. I gained not just a deeper understanding of our economic situation, but a clearer understanding of history and challenges that lay ahead of us. It was a dark time, and I couldn't see a bright future for my family. I was scared and I felt lost. I started to research survival methods and joined prepper groups that were actually trying to shield themselves from all sorts of potential threats. I was driven to find security and comfort somehow. It was through those channels that I stumbled across permaculture. While I was going to college, I worked as a janitor at night, and as I cleaned the campus, I'd listen to podcasts. And I really liked this one called The Survival Podcast with Jack Spirko. And he always had this pleasant sign-off. He'd say, helping you live a better life if times get tough or even if they don't. And that was a really pleasing sentiment that I chased. And one evening he was talking about this guy named Geoff Lawton who created an oasis in the middle of a desert. And he said that if he could do it there, we could do it anywhere. And that really clicked. And I went out and I consumed everything that Geoff had put together, and Bill Mollison and David Holmgren. And it was a pivotal moment in my life where I went from just consuming problem-oriented documentaries to everything that was solution-oriented. Permaculture, alternative dwellings, renewable energy, anything that would help create independence. I wanted to use my newly acquired degree in automation and somehow apply it towards agriculture. I also took a class in solar panels and solar hot water heating systems, and I wanted to work somewhere in the renewable energy field. So I got a job working for a marine electronics company, and then eventually I worked for the Port of New Orleans. I was finally making enough to get some land. We found a 10-acre piece of land in southern Mississippi, which is about an hour and a half commute for me. I found myself stuck at work 3 to 5 days a week though, and I had to sleep on an air mattress. So in 2015, I suffered a workplace injury that left me required to have a spinal fusion, and I was bedridden for over 1.5 years. And it was during that time that I saw Geoff Lawton was offering an online permaculture design course. I couldn't have come at a better time for me because I needed to reboot on the other side of this. And then I upgraded my design studio and started practicing permaculture designs with the aid of my drone. Using drones was cool and all, but the tree canopy returns and the thick vegetation really obscured the terrain below and was a pain to work around. I soon discovered LiDAR data though, which gave me the ability to be able to see through all the trees and vegetation. I went all in on learning how to manipulate LiDAR data and develop useful visual aids to prime my permaculture design with. Very soon after I started getting a handle on it, I was wondering if Geoff has LiDAR data in his area. It turned out he did, so then I worked up a series of maps that covered his entire town, and I sent them to him. I wanted to show him what we could be leveraging when we're assessing landscapes. He invited me to come work with his consultancy team, and since then we've done dozens of projects around the world now, and beyond that I've done over 100 maps, and I've also been featured at Esri's annual convention, and they've published my work in their annual book of maps. I'm truly honored to be able to be working alongside my hero and with many other permaculture designers out there in the world. But we have a short window of opportunity for us to be able to affect change in a timely manner. The amount of just environmental degradation and loss of life, the aquifers being pumped dry, and everything else that is, if we fail on any one of those measures, that is a wrap. But we have the design science, we have the technology to be able to model our landscapes and give marching orders to the 7 billion occupants of this planet, and we could terraform this into just a ridiculous state of abundance. I can see it clearly.
You know, it's one of those things where, as it's all playing out, there's this sense of hopelessness because there's not a clearly defined path where this country's ship gets righted. Mm-hmm. It's like I just see a lot of chaos and a lot of confusion and a lot of infighting, and I don't know how this plays out. It doesn't seem like there's a real clear, this is our path to sanity.
You're right. And I think the first step towards that path, though, is people recognizing what the insanity is and the problems. And I think that more and more these things are coming to light.
I think it's a mistake to ask if people, and make all people the same as one entity, if they will understand it. I don't care if all people understand it. When you're faced with an overwhelming, life-threatening crisis, as in the Titanic being hit by an iceberg, and you happen to be aware before anybody else is that the ship is going to sink and there aren't enough lifeboats, and you know how to build lifeboats, and you tried to deal with that in however long the Titanic had before it went down, you're likely to run across three types of passenger on the Titanic. You'll run across a type that's basically deer in the headlights. Ship's been hit. What does that mean? What do? I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. Should I do that? I don't know. That's one group. There's another group that says, we get that the ship's going to sink. We get that we're all going to die unless we make some lifeboats and do it fast. Show us what to do. And then you have a third group that says, this is the Titanic. It's absolutely unsinkable, unsinkable. And so we're going back to the bar for a drink, and all you doomsday sayers can actually just take a hike. Now, if you're the one who knows how to build lifeboats, which group of people are you going to help?
Hi, Geoff Lawton here. I'm in a large kitchen garden, and this kitchen garden is fertilized by a chicken composting system. It's a system that works from small to large commercial applications. It's a design that builds fertility continuously. It's guaranteed to work because it's an engine of fertility created by design by applying the action of chickens. Now, you also get egg production, and you can also have chicken production because you can incubate the eggs, or your chickens can go broody. But the main function is that the chickens are put to work at what they do best, which is continuously scratch and continuously consume insects and seeds. And most of those seeds are weed seeds, or they can be. Now, they're not on the ground. The fertility is on the ground, and it's continuously producing. It's producing at an extremely high rate of both volume, potential diversity, and nutrient density. So it's one of the best food production systems that I've ever seen, and anybody can follow this system. You can easily produce 1 cubic meter of compost once a month with a small urban system that only covers 16 square meters of ground. On a commercial level, you can produce 1 cubic meter a week, or up to 2 cubic meters a week on a larger system. 30 chickens will easily produce 1 cubic meter of compost every week of the year. That's 52 weeks on half an acre, 2,000 square meters of production, or 2 cubic meters covering a whole acre of production. If you follow the process carefully, what you do is you design a system where the chickens roost on top of organic matter, mulch, straw, any of your basic high carbon mulch type materials. And it needs to be at least 1/3 of a cubic meter. After 1 week of those chickens manuring onto that material, it's included in a compost pile as the base layer. On top of that is an equal amount of animal manure. That can be cow, horse, sheep, goat, any of the large animals. And then on top of that, you have to gather or accumulate 1/3 of a meter of food scraps or weeds from your garden, or a combination of both. They're put in a pile, and the chickens are set to work. They naturally go for that pile and turn it over and spread it and disassemble it out, leaving a hard core in the middle and a spread outer edge. 1 week later, you reassemble that with the spread material in the core and the core on the outside, so they naturally allow you an easy way to turn it inside out. You perform that every week and make a new pile of materials every week. You fill up your chicken pen with mulch, you bring in more large animal manure and food scraps and weeds. Every week you make a new pile. 5 weeks later, just 5 turns in 35 days, you have 1 cubic meter of material coming out at the other end of the commercial systems, or 2 cubic meters if you have 50 chickens. In the urban system, you just turn it over once a week. From a cage to an open pile, from an open pile to a cage. And then you have a system within 6 to 8 weeks, you have a cubic meter coming out. And a week later, you have a second cubic meter. 12 cubic meters a year for an urban system. You've got to see what 12 cubic meters of high quality fertilizer, high quality organic compost does to an urban garden. 1,000 square meters could easily be fertilized, or much less would be even more fertile. And then if you go into a commercial system where you have 1 cubic meter every week going on 2,000 square meters, half an acre, or 2 cubic meters going on an acre, the fertility is continuous. The production is continuous. It can be diverse, and it's obviously very high in nutrition. You're getting the highest production rates possible. You can go up to 12 tons to the acre in production equivalent in a per square meter production ratio. This system is guaranteed to feed humanity on an urban and commercial level. So here with the urban chicken tractor on steroids, we have the compost that's being turned all week by the chickens, literally dissembled, and then we have the cage compost sitting here processing for a week. And we take the cage off the one that's processing on its own, and we position it in the empty space, and we fill it up with the one that the chickens have been scratching and disassembling. We assemble it in the cage. A week later, this one's disassembled, and that's the spare space. So we move the cage from here to here, and we fill it up with the one the chickens have been scratching. And every week it changes. Over 6 to 7, 8 weeks sometimes, then we get a completely processed 2 cubic meters. So over a year, you get 12 cubic meters of compost produced in just 16 square meters of chicken system. And that's enough to completely revolutionize urban gardening, so that every urban garden that can allow 16 square meters of this process gets completely fertilized every year with 12 cubic meters of compost. You can then grow just about anything. If your garden's 1,000 square meters or right down to 500, 400, 300, 200 square meters, you'd be flying. But you've also got between 8 and 10 eggs every single day of the year. Can't get a better deal than that. This is the back end of our urban chicken composting system. And this door here lifts up so that we can keep stacking material in. It takes a few weeks to process our compost in the front end. Now, if we keep stacking here, we'll keep this full, because the chickens manure into this every night, stacked up with manure. And it starts to break down a little bit, and we want volume. So this is just some lawn clippings. Every time a lawn's mowed, and we've got clippings in the catcher, we can put extra in here. It'll receive extra manure, and it'll be better fertilizer as an initial compost component. Because this is our bulk material to make our compost with to start off. By the time our compost finished, we've already made a good mixture here. I'm just shoving this forward because I've got a few weeds to put in as well. Weeds out of the garden, they can all go in here. And they'll start the process, because we've got 6 to 8 weeks of this material being continuously manured onto. And if it starts to drop in volume, because it's already decomposing, we can put a little bit more in. Diversity makes it even better. Then we open up the other side when we're ready to make our new compost, and we pull it out and we start to build our cage compost from the other side. There we go. That's stacked that up. Let's drop that down. Bang, locked in, ready to receive manure and be ready to go into the bulk composting mix in a few weeks' time. So here we are, this is the system, and this is the system in trial. Now, if you set a system up properly, you can put frames right over the chickens and chicken wire all over the top and make sure they're 100% retained inside the system, because you don't want chickens getting into that fertile garden. They're not good in amongst that garden. They're going to eat your seeds and scratch through your vegetable beds. And also at the top here, you can put in a big door, enough that this door or gate, a tractor can go through. A tractor can then push the material from inside through to the first pile and deliver new material in. So you can push through from the top pile, can get pushed to the second pile, and new material can come in and supply everything needed to make a new pile at the top and top up the chicken system with mulch. At the bottom, you can have a large gate door that a tractor can come in and take the pile number 5, the pile that's ready, out to the garden, and you can pull down the 4th pile into the 5th position. That means only pile 2 and 3 need to be turned by hand. And that's where you need to keep your eye on it as well, to make sure you've got a system where the compost is processing really well in the mid stages. Everything else is about fertility delivered straight to the garden and nutrient density harvested every day of the year. Okay, let's have a look at the main workers here, because the main workers are our chickens. And they're really in action because we've got a brand new pile. Pile's just been made here. It's been constructed with the roost material that's been under the roost. It's been there a week, it's been manured and scratched already. Then large animal manure, and then food scraps and weeds on top. Now here in the foreground, we have grapes. We have grapes going along the fence. All the way through the system, you can have grapevines over the footpaths. 2 metre wide footpaths on either side of the main chicken system, and 2 metre wide footpaths in between each garden bed. And they can have frames over as well, because in a cold climate, you can have glass houses or polytunnels, and you can lift the side of the windows up, or you can lift the polytunnel up in summer to let more ventilation in. In a really hot climate like a desert, you can have a shade house over the top and lift the sides up in winter. You can have trellises over, and you can have a deciduous vine crop over. You can have a perennial vine crop for partial shade in the tropics. You can choose the type of shade you have over the gardens, and you can trellis between over the footpath, dividing the gardens with a vine crop. So you can have perennial or annual vines on all of the trellises. That adds to production. There's a few hundred individual vines that can be planted inside the system. So we've increased production again. We've gone up into the vertical space and the horizontal shade space. And we've got our chickens, and we've got the diverse vegetables. These systems will feed humanity in the perimeter urban systems, and even out on commercial farms. This is an integrated system of production that never, ever loses fertility if you keep the engine running. And the engine itself is a productive, self-replicating engine. You can breed your own chickens, you can save your own seeds, you can divide your own root propagules. Let's have a look at how fertile these systems are. This material has been processed in 5 weeks, and it's pretty good compost. Now, 30 chickens produce 1 cubic meter every single week of the year, 53 cubic meters. If you have 50 birds and a slightly larger system, you can produce 2 cubic meters every week of the year. 106 cubic meters of compost going on the growing beds of 1 acre is guaranteed to work. It's guaranteed to give you permanent productivity, so you're always yielding and you're always maintaining full soil ecosystem population. In Iraq, he's 24 years old, and he's in the last town that ISIS made a stronghold, Tel Afar, where half the buildings are flat pancaked on the floor. The sewage lake outside of town we just turned into a blackwater reed bed system, and half the women have been sex slaves and been returned to their community. So I don't know if you can imagine how dangerous that is, but he's one of your residents here. He's a pretty strong lad. He'll be back in about 2 weeks, hopefully. And with a few stories about ISIS, if you want to hear them. Not quite what the news said. But anyway, that's where some of our people are, and they're fast-tracking their experience. So that's just a sort of bit of a video I put together for you. With a bit of playing with animation and stealing some graphics.
How your some of those Jordan ones are getting quite old, or they've been going for a long time now. How are they going over time? Are they just getting stronger and stronger?
Jordan's phenomenal. Yeah. We just put a natural swimming pool in. That's we renovated it. We've got the block next door. Had a terrible house on it, but they'd copied a lot of our fruit tree systems without support species. So we bought that block, we knocked the house down, and we built a mud brick internal wall, straw bale, exterior wall house. And there was an old swimming pool we've renovated into a natural swimming pool with a plant cleaning system. We've got 2 of those at Zaytuna Farm. That's attracted a lot of attention. The old system's very shady now and very productive. When I was there, dates were coming in pretty strong. They were all harvested while I was there, and olives started while I was there and completely harvested. And citrus was coming on because it's going into winter. And we have an organic cafe at the front, and we have a traditional restaurant on the 3rd floor. We now have a straw bale, mud brick, 3-story education centre, Airbnb, student accommodation. With this, we got funded during COVID to put a restaurant on the top floor for mostly traditional food, but grown, cooked, organic.
So were these previously populated places that you'd been to, or did you sort of green an area then people came to live there? Or?
It's a refugee camp from 1948. There was no people ever settled there ever in history. It's all a refugee crisis from Palestinian West Bank. You're at the lowest place on earth, 400 metres below sea level. Well, we're not quite. We're about 300. We can see the Dead Sea, which is 400, and we look straight at the city of Jericho, which is the capital of Palestine. So we can see the lights of Jerusalem at night on the Palestinian highlands. So we're right on a geopolitical war zone, really. So Jericho's 10,000 years old, but it's on an east-facing slope. We're on the other side of the valley, facing west. You never settle a west slope in that climate, but it's refugee pressure. So a lot of the refugee camps started in 1948, and they're still there. So we have no street numbers, we have no street names.
And so what's the name of the place?
We're in a little village called Jawasari. We're next to a village called Jofa. We're in the Shuna Janabia district of the Dead Sea Valley. And most of the population are Palestinian descent.
Can I ask a question or just about moving? Just changing the subject. With your chicken system, I noticed it's pretty labour intensive and you had a lot of people who were working in the gardens. Is there any way that you can make it less labour intensive, like for one little old person?
Sure,
So
much more efficient.
So you could maybe move the chooks instead of like move the whole chook shed?
Absolutely, no problem at all. One of the disadvantages of having students and volunteers is They're there to learn. They're not there because they're very skilled. So what they're very good at is losing things, breaking things, and killing things, right? Which is quite expensive. So you just gotta realise what you're putting your hand up for, you know. We're used to that.
Think about how I could apply that, and I really couldn't physically do the work.
Yeah. So
is there another way?
Yeah, absolutely. You could just scale the system down. As long as you've got 1 cubic metre, right, turn less over time or turn more in less time. I have made compost in 10 days, but at that point you're a master chef and you have to get out of my kitchen. I've got to be the only one to turn it. I've often done it in 12 days during one of our 2-week courses just to prove the point. Again, you've got to get out of the way. You've got to be a master chef at that point. Like a master chef doesn't need a recipe and doesn't weigh things and you know, like just goes by instinct. You know what you're doing. I've done my 10 years with a compost making. But yeah, definitely you can change the system completely. That's just a system where half an acre can definitely be run by one strong farm worker, and an acre can be easily managed by 2. I directly had this experience coming back. I got trapped in Saudi Arabia during COVID and took an extra month to get home eventually. As you can hear, I'm a Pommy, so I have a second passport, an English one that I keep pretty clear. Australia wasn't going to get us out of Saudi, we were just going to be left there. So I claimed my English citizenship and said, get me out of here, I want to go home to England with my family, because my wife and daughter were with me. And they got me to Heathrow, and then I had a flight booked straight to Qatar, which was still open, and straight to Melbourne for 2 weeks in a hotel on government expense. And then I got back here, and it was the Mary Celeste. No one was here. So for a couple of months, I had to run the whole farm on my own. So, and you know, like we've set it up for, you know, lots of people to learn and get experience. And I was all by myself. So that was daunting. And the first thing I had to do was change the cell grazing. But I also went straight back to electric net. If you know the new electric nets. Well, they sell probably the best electric nets in Norco, in Lismore. They're as good as any today. Electric net fence. It's made out of nylon with electric wire in it. It's about $300. Right? But revolutionised.
I've got a lot of shock tape, but
no, you've got to keep chickens in. Yeah, like you can, if you've got pretty tame chickens, you can use a non-electric net. It's a little bit finer mesh. Right? But we often use electric net and a sender, you know, electric sender. And we keep goats and chickens in electric nets. And then I moved the mobile chicken pen onto the compost with the electric net and then moved them over. I'm actually sponsored by Chicken Caravan, which is a brand in Australia. And they have a chicken caravan. They call it caravan. It's on wheels. There's a chicken caravan for 10 chickens. There's a chicken caravan for 30, and then 130, and then 450. They go out to really big guys. So we use the chicken caravan 30. It's been amazing system. So it's something you can move on your own, or someone makes you a little pen you can move on your own. There's one that someone makes on the internet. It's a student of mine called you know what a rickshaw is? He calls it a chicksaw, right? So it's got big wheels and he can just roll it around with 10 to 15 chickens in it. And you can definitely do it with a 1 cubic metre. It just takes a little bit of design. And you can go slower if you don't want, you know, a compost heap every month. You could do every 2 months.
I've got a lot of horse and straw manure, like, that I basically...
Really, it's just there are lots of ways you can compost, and you go really scientific. And in the soil food web today, we all use microscopes and look at the number of organisms and diversity of organisms. And you can even join a compost microscope club on Facebook, and they'll show you their videos every day and their photos every day, because we're looking at 50 million genus of fungi, which we only know 1% of them, 50 million genus of bacteria. They're the main group. Then you have protozoas, flagellates, and nematodes. All these weird things are in the soil. We now know that you can easily get to 50 tons of soil organisms in a hectare, but you can go up to 200. You can't put 200 tons of animals on a hectare. Well, you could, but it'd make a big mess. So it's really, you don't actually feed anything organically in the soil. You can't feed crops organically. You can't feed trees organically. Not possible. You feed the soil organisms and they feed the crops and the trees. You're actually feeding the soil. So what you're actually doing there with chickens is you're building something, doesn't have to be perfect, nothing has to be perfect. You're building organisms you're building a system that favors the organisms in the soil. Right? That's why it's infallible. Right? And in this case, chickens are your disciplinarians. Because chickens live to scratch. That's why they're the gateway animal. They all come from one bird in Southeast Asia, which is still alive, the Malay jungle fowl. In fact, you can buy eggs that are fertile eggs for the Malay jungle fowl. Looks a bit like a brown leghorn, if you know what that looks like. But we've got all these poultry clubs, including Lismore, which I love, the poultry club. But the advantages of the chicken is that convenience that they just process organic matter all day if you put them to work. They just live to scratch. They eat weed seed, they eat bug, they eat pest larvae, and they're doing something else we can't understand.
They also eat a lot of native stuff like frogs and stuff.
Sure.
It's really distressing when you see them do that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
If you have a chicken pen like Fort Knox, you get every predator.
But then if you're doing the right thing with the soil, you end up with 15 rare species of frog like we have. And we've gone from 53 species of bird to 112. And I have 3 cats. And I've never had less rats or snakes than I've ever had before. And they get told off if they ever hit a bird or do anything to a bird. But I have a cat that probably gets 800 rats a year. Still now. We're in rat country. I mean, we really have. You're an organic farmer and you're successful, you're going to get rodents. I never even hear a rat. I never even see a rat manure anymore. They're gone. And people criticize me for cats, but you can quote The Origin of Species and Charles Darwin and what he had to say about cats and what he didn't have to say about horses and other animals that live with us. It's an interesting read. But, I mean, I couldn't have more frogs. You can walk the swales on our place by sound after rain. It's a sound. It's so noisy. My wife comes from a desert and she has trouble sleeping because of our damn frogs, They're very rarely free range. They're doing many different jobs. They're doing many jobs around the other animals too. I have Nigerian dwarf goats, which are the best milking goat in the world, with a very unusual milk and a very unusual milk fat. And it's milk that doesn't smell like male goats smell. Goat's milk smells a little bit like male goats who pee on themselves to get that smell. Nigerian dwarf milking goats don't do that. I've got a breed stock because they're very few in the country. And they're so very expensive. My first 4 goats cost me 10 grand because there were so few in the country. We're part of the breeders now. But in the tick season, like when it comes to like July, August, September, I put a certain amount of chickens with the goats. Just reduce the chance that they get ticks.
Have you ever tried using bush turkeys instead of chickens?
No, I haven't. But I know many of the local herb growers like the compost and actually put them to work. It's a Channon thing, I've heard. Yeah. I've only heard. And then when we test the compost, it's a very unusual compost because it's only made out of local materials and it has to keep the compost to a temperature of about 30 degrees centigrade to hatch the eggs. And then the fastest birds to fly in the world. They can fly within 30 minutes of hatching. So I nag my students, different academics that come and say they want to take a thesis. Why doesn't someone study the bush turkey and its compost? And eventually I got one who got their thesis on bush turkey compost study. That's why they're a doctor of bush turkey or something. One really unusual thing is that the bush turkey compost favours natives. Favours native tree germination. You notice that nothing grows in a bush turkey nest over the years. Only native rainforest species usually germinate from a bush turkey nest.
I just wanted to get back to your chooks again.
Huh?
Because I'm seriously thinking about it. Roosters and guinea fowl. What do you do? But what do you do with your roosters?
Yeah.
Like you obviously you have chickens, so you must have roosters.
Yeah.
So do you keep them with the hens?
Yeah. Well, I usually have one.
Too many roosters.
Well, I eat them. Yeah. And what I do is I do first cross hybrids to get a meat bird in 16 weeks. I'm happy with 19. 16 I'm real pleased about. And so big birds, but different breeds. So you can have one rooster as a big breed, and that hens can be any other big breed, but not the same as the rooster. And then the first cross, the first eggs from that pair, give you a fast breeding meat bird. And when it comes to general roosters, right, I have a big one for meat birds, and then we have egg layers that are different, right? So you have egg layers or dual purpose, and then meat birds. I usually, in all the flocks, I normally have one young rooster, one old rooster, should I say, who's a good performer, and one young rooster to keep him on his toes. He's always the underdog, but he's always keeping the old guy honest, you know. And when he can't perform, he has to go, and he'll go in the pot. In fact, people drop roosters off at our place at night on the road, and I go and pick them up. Yeah, they keep dropping them at our front. We're very grateful, right? They could just give them to us. Instead, my daughter and I have to sneak up there with a little torch and grab them out of the trees at night. If you go and stealing chickens, you go at night with a torch covered by your hand. Don't use too much light. Grab them off the perch.
Sorry. I was reading an article on permaculture that were talking about ducks being a major player in their system, and I was just interested because I ended up, I always had chickens, but I just ended up with a duck. I actually found it interesting having the duck in the garden with me because of the elasticity of his feed. He could actually tread on my seedlings and they seemed to bounce back, and he could mosey around and get, insects that I wanted him to eat without destroying the ground, digging it up. But how did ducks go in a system like today? Because, they do get their beaks in and go through stuff. How do they go in?
It's a little bit more difficult because they will tread on your seedlings if you have too many ducks. So often if you've got little seedlings, you need little ducks. So as your garden gets bigger, your ducks get bigger. And if you've got it right, it handles it. That's how they do it with a duck rice system. And then you harvest your ducks, right? You take them as meat ducks. The one trouble, I love Muscovies, which are actually a goose, but they're called a duck. The one trouble with every duck, except for the Peking, is that you have to pluck them. Where you can put chickens through a plucking machine, right? But, which is handy, because we might do 120 chickens at once, and that's got to go through a plucking machine, otherwise it's a lot of work. But only the Peking can you pluck, and it's because it has a molt every 12 weeks. 6 to 12 weeks, you can tell they're molting, and then they'll pluck in a plucking machine. So most of your commercial ducks that you're eating, Lover Duck and brands like that you can get out there, they're all Peking because of the pluck. No, you can't, commercially in the commercial world, you can't ever afford someone to hand pluck anymore. I mean, we do. As a home grower, home producer, sure, you can pluck. Muscovies, we pluck, definitely. Big bird. So just a little bit awkward there of, you've only got one duck and you've got away with it. If you had too many, you would start getting crushed little seedlings. Yeah. And you can have a duck pond, because most of the large ducks need a pond to breed in, because the drake is heavy. They normally mate in the water. They don't have to have a lot of water, but if they have a little pond, you end up after a while with a pond that's really green with duck manure. That can be used as a liquid fertilizer if you're careful, or can be an activator on your compost to add onto your compost to make it start working better. There are a lot of activators for compost. Comfrey, nettles, yarrow, urine, dead animals, dead fish, worm juice from the worm farm. All those are activators.
Do you incorporate the, like, for example, if you're on a property that's surrounded by native trees, do you incorporate the pollinators and the sort of, so you find out when your natives are flowering and fruiting so that might provide pollinators for your garden and vice versa? Is there an interaction there between the garden and the forest?
I'm sure there is. I mean, you really can't help it. I mean, there's so many natives through all the gullies, and some of them are really, persistent. Like Glacydina fernandii, the cheese tree. It comes up a lot through the orchards, and we use it as mulch. We pollard it or coppice it. But yeah, we have native bees and we have the honeybee in the system. We've got those ourselves. And whatever else is coming with the native gullies. You could see from the photo, 1943 to now, there's a hell of a lot more trees in the Channon than there was back then. It's enormous. And there was a lot more crops in 1943, a lot more crop field. The Channon market was a crop. Our bottom ridges were crops. And you can see the lines in the paddock. So, we've got more trees, that's for sure.
What would that have been, beans or something? They were cropping there?
I really don't know. There is an old peach, there's a remnant of old peach system in our property. It looks like we can kind of see it on the map. It was the non-tropical variety, so there would have been a lot of spray on them. I don't know what else it was. It predates the previous owner, I think. Our block's the Amos block. So it's Fred and Julia Amos who are in the Channon history book.
I knew their son Graham,
Well, I bought the property off Julia. Yeah, in her old age. Yeah. And it was her father that got the first title. And it was logged in 1898. So some of the he never blew a stump. So all the old remnant stumps are still there. And when I started in 2001, I still had some stumps like this. And I had to destock it. There was no fences internally that were working. The cattle were on the creek. Pinchin Road was fenced, and the north and south boundary were fenced, but they were on the creek. I couldn't stock it to start with. So when I started to rerun over the property with a tractor, I'd run into these stumps because the grass was so high. They were really solid old stumps. Gradually, we've sort of taken them down to soil level. That's just how they left it. They didn't take the stumps out. So they were the old growth, really. And I can identify 28 trees on that photograph that are there now. They're still there. There's a pink bouillon, and there's a lot of white beech, and there's quite a few Flinders Schottiana that are there, and some brush box. They're the big trees that were left. And they're on that 1943. I tried to find them and identify them and try and get a GPS coordinate on them and different things like that, just to see what was there and what they look like now. And they're trees I'm growing from as well in regen, where we're putting down regen. So we have 28 bodies of water on there now. They've become very small to reasonable size. And we have 4 kilometres of contour swales that are all forested at different ages. And we're still doing earthworks. We just had to do earthworks for the recovery from the flood. Because like everybody, we got a thrashing. But we were able to repair it and add some extra features. Now we think we're 100-year flood proof. We think we've got every spillway handled, except for some silt traps that are going to have to be put in to receive the neighbour from across the road, because the neighbour land slipped towards us and filled a couple of dams full of sand and gravel, which we've yet to clear. But rest of the spillways, everything should handle the next 100-year flood.
How did your earth buildings go with the rain?
Fine. Yeah, there was just one co-joined spillway which already had a little bit of issue because of lack of maintenance around connecting diversion drains, if you like. There was a complicated section between two dams that I put in, never expecting that event. And what I did was I filled them and put spillways at opposite ends of those two dams, so they're separated completely where they were co-joined. And that was the biggest mess we had. But it was a really good exercise. And then a swale above it, we have a lot of swale history. The oldest swale on the property always had a problem, that it used to slip a little bit. And all the old guys that I've spoken to from 20 years ago to now tell me about the slips up around that top section of our property onto the property next door and across the road. So I took it that it was just natural slippage. We had a look at that after the flood, and we found when we went a little bit deeper, there was a great big sheet of white clay, and it was at an angle. And the country on the sandstone on top of it was sitting on top of that clay, like you were saying, the water moving along that clay, but it wasn't flat. It was quite like 45 degrees, and it was shearing off that beautiful white clay. So we went in there and took that tilt the other way and ran it out, and then rebuilt on top of it. And instead of a swale, we built a canal between two dams, which is gorgeous now. But we had to key it in like a dam all the way along the swale. What was a swale turned into kind of like a long dam wall, which is how you build a canal. But we knew the clay was there, and we knew we could key into something really solid. So I always say you never know what you're going to hit when you go into dinosaur country. When you get down underground, you're never quite sure what you're going to get. I've never found a big lump of gold or a diamond or a gem. I've come really close to petroglyphs, but not hit them, right? Otherwise they'll stop the job. But you hit interest in geology, and sometimes you look at it and it looks like the landscape's been turned upside down. You can hit a coarse sand seam on a ridge, and it looks like that was once a creek. And it can't be, it's on the top of a ridge, but in millennia, she's probably all been upside down, you know. It's like our previous speaker was saying, that you got layers that come up that when you first see them, it doesn't make sense. But there's some layers you don't want to hit when you're putting a pond or a dam in. You want to seal it, so you don't want to hit gravel, because you can't seal on gravel, you've got to go through it, or really coarse sand. And sometimes you hit that way, it looks like there's been a creek, but you're on a ridge. It's like, who knows? And sometimes around here you hit the Big Bang. That's what the earth movers call it. That's when Mount Warning blew up and everything got vaporized, charred black, and you get down there and you just hit this black layer. The earth movers reckon it was Mount Warning blowing. Often it's quite good pluggy clay, but there's this absolutely charred black layer that they think was the volcanic explosion. We've got that just below Pinchins Road, near Canorigan Road. We hit something like that, and we built what they call a slop dam, which is like, it's puggy clay you can't roll on. You have to build them with an excavator. And it's sealed fine. They often go a bit wobbly. They don't necessarily sit firm because it's wet, sloppy clay when you build with it, but it's firm enough to shape. So yeah, it's somewhere around there, which is kind of funny because the middle of our property is non-volcanic. Just up the Channon cut-in here, there's no, not the cut-in, just up where the cliffs are on Trenier Creek Road, there's a property there, and our property is wooden bong sand. So the middle of the property is 2 foot of grey sand on top of yellowy brown clay seams.
So not stones, it's just sand.
It's almost grey sand, and you've got to go the other side of Casino. The sweet potato growers, the old sweet potato growers, love it, but we've got a patch, and there's another patch on the right up Trenier Creek here, and the volcanic action didn't go over it, or it eroded away. I don't know. It's pre-volcanic sand. They reckon it's more than 30 million years old. It's not fertile, but I love it. And my students love it because it's easy to dig, terrible to strain a fence post until you get to the clay underneath and you can't get it out again if it's a star pricket. But it's easy to, as soon as you fertilise it, as soon as you bring it to life, it's fine. What do you grow?
As much as I can.
Nantes. I've found Nantes is the best carrot here.
Mantis?
Nantes with an N.
Mantis.
Nantes. I couldn't grow a really great carrot until I got Nantes. And then I got the best, largest carrots and sweetest carrots, even old ones.
This carrot that seems to do all right.
Yeah, and then we got onto what was it? All season. Yeah. I often find that when I can't grow something well, when I find what I can grow well, then I start to grow other varieties well. But until I find the one that grows really well to start with, I often can't grow other varieties until I've got one that grows well. Then I seem to be able to stretch the variety. Now, I don't know whether that's something to do with the microorganisms getting an appetite for carrots or something. I don't know.
Maybe you just found the right spot for them.
In the same spot. I mean, in the same spot. I've had the same with papayas. I couldn't grow a decent papaya for a while. They're all a bit cool climate, sick in winter. And then I got the right one, and then I can grow more varieties of papaya. And can only be the soils. Learning to live with them. Yeah.
Does that papaya go up on the ridge either? They just struggle on my...
No, we don't, but we can. Like, we have a big nursery. We don't sell anything. We sell information and only sell 5% of that. 95% we give away. And 95% of all our information we give away online. And a lot of education we give away online, but some of our main courses we charge for. That's all.
How would we get some fruit trees?
Just give us a call, we'll come over. Yeah, we're always there. Yeah.
You don't sell produce at the Channon market?
My daughter does sometimes, just for pocket money. Yeah, we're more about education and information. That we make a lot of films, we do a lot of courses, we show a lot of demonstration. We do aid work all over the world. And right now we've just become a community, so we're a small eco-hamlet now, permaculture eco-hamlet, so I have 8 households. And they're all developing. Yeah.
So do you have open days at all?
We do. We have 2 a year, one in winter and one in summer. Yeah.
So there's one coming up? Yeah.
Summer one's coming up, yeah. So we're a lot on Facebook, Discover Permaculture Facebook and Discover Permaculture Instagram. And Zaytuna Farm has its own website as well.
And with the community, are you finding, like, is it working with the personal and with the people, like, because it's a new thing?
Well, they're all still settling. Not everybody's on the ground yet at all. But yeah, we've got an MO, so we all own the land. And then we have an ecotourism development approval in the middle. So we have a campsite, we have a commercial kitchen, we have a classroom, 6 showers, 6 toilet blocks, 10 camping shelters, car parks and everything like that. And we share the income, that's a shared income generator. Our MO is a lease. So you lease, you are a shareholder in a company, it's owned by a company. So Nadia and I sold the property to a company and paid the sales tax, which was ourselves, we were the only shareholders. And then we sold to 7 other shareholders who are shareholders of the company. And you lease the right to build a house for 99 years as a recurring lease. And you agree to live within the Constitution. So if you buy, you have to read the Constitution and agree that you want to live that way. Right? So we wanted to have some control of the type of way people live, and we only wanted an MO. We didn't want community title. We wanted everyone to be responsible for all the land plus their personal use. And the council would only give us 8 building entitlements, house sites. So if you start to live outside the constitutional guidelines, the other shareholders can legally remove the right for you to live on the property if you want to carry on living that way. You can either change the ways or rent it to someone who wants to live that way, or live the way our constitution is written, or you can sell it to someone who agrees to live within the constitution. So we've got some control of the way people live. And it's pretty easy going. Of course, it's all organic, and things like that, But it's a few basic things.
What's the buying cost?
It depends. It's changed. The average was about 300,000 when we first sold, and it all sold in 2 weeks, which shocked me. My house sold in 2 days, which really shocked me.
Who were close to buying back then? What is it now? What is it now?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what people would sell for. We were right at the point where everything was going up quite quick, but it was all an accident. And it was I'd had the approval in for 5 years, so there was a sunset clause, and I had until February this year I think, or last year. I was coming up. I only had about 3 months to go, otherwise I would start all over again. So I had to initiate a commencement, and part of it was to tar Pinchins Road 50 metres past our front gate, which was $250,000. So that sort of showed the council we were serious, and we commenced. But then we just kept going because we had to pay all that. Yeah, so I think they're all very good people that have bought in. Some of them are definitely learning. Some of them are skilled. It's a mixture. And it's slowed down our education, things like that. We have a course, we have a permaculture design course in January. And Sam Parker-Davis will be teaching that, the one who just rang up from Iraq. He's a wonderful teacher, and I'll be co-teaching. You're welcome anytime. Just give us a call or get in touch, or I can leave my details. Ivy's got my details.
Any last questions, Geoff?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.